Now that we've talked about the myth of the American dream, I'd like to turn our attention to some just general background of the play. It was an amazing play. It went on to run for 742 productions after its epical premiere February 10th, 1949 at the Morosco Theater. But a good question to raise is, one, where did Arthur Miller get the title of Death of a Salesman? The producers were worried about having the title Death. We were, after all, just coming after World War I, the Great Depression, then World War II. This play was staged in 1949. And some of the producers were worried that the audience might not go with the word death in the title. And so for a while, Miller experimented with a working title that most people think was the original title, called The Inside of His Head. And indeed, it was a working title, earlier working title of the play. And it's kind of funny because, you know, Miller is in his early 30s and he's trying to mount his second, what turned out to be blockbuster Broadway show. And he wanted to have, as the set, a giant cranium, a human skull split down the middle, and all the action would take place. The characters would walk around in the inside of Willy's head, the inside of his head. It's a play of consciousness in part. It's a play about daydreams and flashbacks. It's a play that takes place in the present, but in the past, in the future. Indeed, Miller wanted to capture, he was obsessed with time, and he wanted to capture the simultaneity of time and how the mind fractures time. So 1 minute we're in the present, the next minute we're in the past. We even project into the future, and it creates a powerful recording of the interior, the inside of Willy's head, if you would. So that works, okay? But before that, there was even an earlier original working title of the play before it came, Death of a Salesman, and it was called A Period of Grace. A Period of Grace. And that's just a wonderful working title because you can work with that loaded word grace in many ways. This is a play, after all, about an anti-heroic, tragic figure, Willy, who falls from grace, right? He commits sin. It's also a play based on the economic sense of grace. Like lenders will give you a 30-day grace period if you need more time to pay your rent or mortgage. And so that a sense of a period of grace works on various levels simultaneously. But finally, Miller insisted on a title now that is a household name in American drama, Death of a Salesman, and the rest, as they say, is history. A lot of people go with Willy Loman on the totem pole, but that's not really what Arthur Miller had in mind at all. He gets the name from an early 30 German film by Fritz Lang called The Testament of Dr. Mabuse. And in it, there's a key character named Loman. It's spelled differently, but it's pronounced Loman. And this is a guy who is out there calling into the void for help that he knows will never come, and then he's killed. And Miller remembered that name, Loman, and that was the inspiration for the title of the lead character, Willy Loman. He was also inspired in part by his own father, but Uncle Manny Newman, one of his uncles. And Miller was struck by, Manny apparently was a high energy guy, kind of had his lost in the clouds, a daydreamer, very competitive, a fabulator. He told all sorts of stories based on fact and fiction. And Miller was kind of entranced by his Uncle Newman. And he had a chance encounter with Manny Newman in Boston, where he ran into him in the theater. Manny Newman had gone to see a production of Miller's All My Sons. And instead of greeting me, he didn't respond to Miller's greeting, hello, Uncle Manny, and Manny Newman didn't respond by saying, "Oh, congratulations, Arthur, great play," or "How are you? So great to see you." Instead, his first word to Arthur was, "Buddy's doing well." Buddy was one of two of Manny Newman's sons, and in Manny's mind, his two sons were in competition with Arthur and Arthur's older brother, Kermit. And Miller said there was always this fraternal kind of dueling going on based on competition, hard work, succeeding in business, the myth of the American dream. And when Manny then announced that he wants to set one of his sons, Buddy, up for business so he can succeed, Miller then realized Manny actually had a good sense of purpose, and this was all sticking in Arthur Miller's mind, and he would draw on Manny Newman, the Fritz Lang film, his father, and undoubtedly other salesmen, as inspirations for who would eventually become Willy Loman. It's not for nothing that soon after Miller met his uncle, Manny Newman, that Manny Newman, like Willy Loman after him, committed suicide. So this weighed heavily on Arthur Miller's mind as he was composing Death of a Salesman. Also, story has it that when Miller was even a late teenager, if I'm remembering correctly, his mother found a notebook in a chest of drawers in Arthur's room, and already early on, he had notes about wanting to write something about a salesman. And so Miller carried with him the seeds of ultimately Willy Loman and Death of a Salesman long before he wrote the play. And finally, another interesting thing about the background of the play, I was involved in a very minor way with the 50th anniversary revival in New York City at the Eugene O'Neill Theater, a beautiful theater. And so there were all sorts of big, around the country, specials on Death of a Salesman, 50th anniversary. And I got a call from the chief cultural critic of the Los Angeles Times, who wanted to interview me for a big Sunday article he was doing about the revival. And he said, do you think the play is as relevant today as it was in 1949? And then he said, after all, don't we tell our children that you're never going to hold down the same job? You're going to bounce from job to job to job to job. And indeed, that proved to be true. And I thought, oh my God, I've been teaching the play all wrong all these years, because Willy stays for 34 years with the same firm. I've been with my university here for over 4 decades. And so this guy planted a seed of doubt in my mind briefly, and then I pushed back and I said, no, if anything, the play is more relevant today, whether we're talking 2024, 1999, 1949. We have manufactured more Willys, Arthur told me over lunch one day, because of this brutal and brutalizing business as sacrament culture, where we're striving to be the 1%, but 99% of us schmucks are going to land in the ash can like all the rest of them, to paraphrase Biff in the climactic scene in the kitchen that brings the play to a close. And so there are all sorts of interesting backgrounds to the play, and I think that helps us better contextualize our understanding of the play. So now that I've given you a brief background, what I'd like to do in the next mini lection or conversation is talk about the key characters of the play.